LinkedIn can watch this back if they so desire. And I am going to share my screen so that we can collectively look at the ISO standard. If somebody can give me a thumbs up or a holler if you can see my screen.
10-4, Brian.
Great, thank you very much. So we're going to take a very similar approach in talking through section 5 of the ISO 1345 regulation today as part of our Understanding ISO series of trainings that we're doing. I'm going to focus kind of specifically in on the areas where the ISO standard includes the word shall, right? And we're going to build on the things that we covered when we reviewed the scope in section 4. I'm going to try and focus on some of the, as we read through the regulation, there's going to be a few times where I'm going to stop and talk about why the regulation is written the way it is or why it is particularly applicable to our business. And just like last time, I'm going to kind of facilitate the conversation by actually going through the ISO regulation itself. I am going to, while I'm thinking about it, join the Teams meeting on my phone here so that if somebody has a question and you want to put it in the chat, rather than come off mute, I'll have the chat up here on my phone so that I can watch that for questions. But also feel free to speak up if you have any questions. It's just that when I'm sharing my screen, my Teams window gets small in the corner and I may not see if you've got your hand raised. All right, got the chat up. All right, section 5 of the ISO regulation talks about management responsibility. And you're going to see, very similar to when we were reviewing section 4 of the regulation, section 5 kind of builds on itself as it goes through the specifics of the regulation. So we're going to start with management commitment. And specifically what we talk about at the beginning is that you're going to, the word shall shows up as we talk about providing evidence of the organization's and specifically top management's commitment to the development and implementation of a QMS and maintaining its effectiveness. When we talk about top management and their commitment to the quality management system, I think it's helpful to talk a little bit about why we would include that requirement in the regulation. And I think first and foremost, in my mind, one of the reasons why the top management requirement is so beneficial or critical from a quality management system standpoint is, you know, I think each of us as quality professionals recognizes that our job becomes increasingly or exponentially more difficult without the support of top management within the organization. A lot of the initiatives, a lot of the changes that we try to drive, a lot of the improvements, if we don't have the support of top management, it can, in many regards, feel like rolling a boulder up a hill. So the regulation includes a requirement that makes it mandatory that top management support the effectiveness and the maintenance of the quality management system. And the way that they do that is by A through E. So the first way they do that is by communicating to the organization the importance of meeting customer as well as applicable regulatory requirements. And I'm going to repeat that because this particular phrasing you're going to see repeated multiple times throughout section 5, and we're going to talk about why that exists. The meeting customer as well as applicable regulatory requirements is what they have to communicate to the organization that we are committing to do through our quality management system. And then we're going to establish quality policy, we're going to have quality objectives, we're going to conduct management reviews, and then we're going to ensure availability of resources. Now, when you take A through E and you break them down into categories, what you're going to see is a couple of things. First, A through D follow this 5.1 and they kind of become their own sections within 5.0 management responsibility. And then they take section E and it becomes section 6.0 when you talk about resources. So A through D are going to be further built upon in the remainder of section 5, and then we move on into resources in section 6. You're also going to see that this customer as well as applicable regulatory requirements is immediately preceded as part of our customer focus. Top management will ensure, once again, that customer requirements and applicable regulatory requirements are determined and met. So we're kind of, in the same way we kind of built upon each section in 4.0, here we're saying in 5.1a that we will communicate customer and applicable regulatory requirements. We're going to communicate those in 5.1. In 5.2, we're talking about defining them. When they say the top management is going to ensure that customer and regulatory requirements are determined and met, that determined, you can think of that as meaning defined, right? We're going to have a set of customer requirements that usually comes across in the form of customer specifications. We're going to have a set of regulatory requirements that are driven by international and domestic regulations. We're going to define those within our quality management system, and then top management is committed to communicating those out to the rest of the organization. So that is how Section 5 kind of starts to build upon the previous phrasing in the regulation. Any questions about that before I move on to quality policy? Okay. Quality policy. This one is pretty straightforward. Top management is going to ensure that you have a quality policy that does A through E, that it is applicable to the purpose of your organization, meaning what your company does within the realm of medical devices, that it includes, and we're seeing this again, includes a commitment to comply with requirements and maintain effectiveness of the quality management system, provides a framework for your quality objectives. It's communicated throughout the organization. So once again, top management is having to communicate throughout the entire organization what the requirements are. And then it is reviewing for continuing suitability. So it's kind of an ongoing review and approval process. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring up our actual quality policy for Viant very quickly and walk through it with you to kind of talk about what the regulation requires and how we accomplish that with our quality policy. So I'll read it very briefly. Viant is committed to providing quality medical devices and components that are used to save or enhance the lives of patients we serve. We maintain compliance with current quality and regulatory requirements, as well as those of our customers. We monitor, manage risk, and take action throughout our processes to ensure the continued effectiveness of our quality system. So let's go back to the regulation. The first thing the regulation says is that our quality policy should be applicable to our organization's purpose. So our organization, see if I can do this, provides quality medical devices and components that are used to save the lives of patients we serve. That is the applicable purpose of our organization and how our quality policy establishes our purpose of our quality system. The second thing that the regulation requires is that we have to commit to comply with our quality management system and maintain its effectiveness. So here's that commitment right here. We will maintain compliance with current quality and regulatory requirements as well as those of our customers. Remember that repeated phrasing, customer and regulatory requirements. Top management has to commit to those things. That's how we demonstrate that here in our quality policy. The next thing, provide a framework for establishing and reviewing quality objectives. We will monitor, right? We will monitor our quality system. We will establish objectives, monitor those objectives to determine our performance. We will manage risk, and we will take action. When we see that we are not meeting our quality objectives, we will take action in order to try and achieve them. So then we have to review it for suitability. So throughout our processes, we will ensure continued effectiveness of our quality system. That is the ongoing review of our quality system and our quality policy to make sure that it is still effective and suitable for our organization. And the only thing that we haven't touched on, going back to the regulation very quickly, is the communicated and understood within the organization. Obviously, we don't put in our quality policy that we will communicate it to the organization, but functionally, we do that in a number of ways. We are supposed to train to the quality policy. We post the quality policy at various locations within the facilities on the walls and posters. And then we frequently talk about the quality policy in management reviews. It's a slide in most of the PowerPoint presentations. So there are a number of avenues by which we communicate our quality policy throughout the organization. So it's kind of a quick and easy example of how the quality policy that we have written is specifically geared to meet the requirements of this regulation. And I will tell you that you can get findings for your quality policy. So for example, I have seen quality policies that did not include a commitment to comply with requirements. The quality policy was good, and it talked about their commitment to patients and their wanting to benefit humanity and do good things, but it didn't include a commitment to comply with customer requirements and regulatory requirements, and that is a potential nonconformance if your quality policy does not include that. Questions about quality policy before we move on to 5.4 planning? Okay, so scrolling back up real quick. We're going to communicate to the organization the importance of meeting customer regulatory requirements. Section 5.3, quality policy, we talked about that. The next one is quality objectives. 5.4 is planning your quality objectives. So when you get into 5.4 and you're talking about your objectives, top management shall ensure that quality objectives, including those needed to meet applicable regulatory requirements, are established, that they have different objectives for relevant functions and levels within the organization. The easiest way to demonstrate in an audit that we have established quality objectives is our tier 1 metrics. So cross-functionally, we have tier 1 metrics for supply chain functions, for quality functions, for operations functions, specifically in quality. Hopefully you're all very familiar with what our tier 1 metrics are, but it is our complaint rate, our non-conformance rate, and it is our CAPA aging, right? The number of CAPAs that are over 180 days. So at the most basic level, our tier 1 objectives represent quality objectives for the organization. Your site probably also has additional quality metrics. You probably have additional operations, engineering, and supply chain metrics. You have strategic initiatives or quality improvements that you're implementing. All of those things can fall under the category of quality objectives, but in its most reduced form, the tier 1 metrics are your quality objectives for the organization. There are some requirements about what your quality objectives must be able to do, and I think one of the most important elements is that it shall be measurable. Remember, when we're reading these regulations, we always want to highlight whenever we see the word shall, because if you see the shall, then they're going to be looking for evidence that you've met that, right? So your quality objectives have to be measurable. We certainly have measurable tier 1 metrics. They're all, they're quantitative versus qualitative, and they have to be consistent with the quality policy. So your tier 1 metrics should be geared towards the things that you state in your quality policy. When in our quality policy, when we talk about providing medical devices that meet customer and regulatory requirements, we're talking about manufacturing product that is conforming. And when you manufacture a conforming product, the way you measure product conformity is through complaints, non-conformances, and CAPAs. So that is how our tier 1 metrics are consistent with the objectives of our quality policy. So as we move into 5.2, top management shall ensure, again, we see that shall, that the planning is done to ensure 4.1 as well as the quality objectives. So we're going to do some planning of our quality management system so that we can meet those tier 1 objectives and so that we can meet the requirements in 4.1. Now, 4.1 is just the general requirements of having a quality management system, okay? So we're gonna plan our quality management system so that we can meet 4.1, which describes the structure of a quality system, if you recall from our previous training. And we're gonna design our quality system so that we can meet our quality objectives. So the way that you would kind of connect those two is you would talk about what our procedures are for complaints, non-conformances, and CAPA, but you would also talk about our oversight of the tier 1 metrics, how frequently we're talking about those metrics every month. We are evaluating our quality system to make sure that it's sufficient to help us achieve those objectives, things like that. That's how you would talk to that in an audit. And then section B here talks about the integrity of the quality system. When you change the quality system, you have to maintain the integrity of the quality management system. So this is, remember that we're talking about section 5, so we're talking about management responsibility. Once again, this section is requiring that top management or leadership within your organization is responsible for maintaining the integrity of the quality management system whenever you make changes. So just because you initially created a quality management system that met all these requirements, if you then go change something, you cannot change it in such a way that you no longer comply with the structure of a quality system outlined in 4.1, and you can't change it in such a way that your quality system no longer allows you to meet your tier 1 objectives or your quality objectives. Okay, so now we're talking about authority and communication. We saw it in the beginning of section 5, where it said that top management was going to communicate to the organization their commitment to meeting customer requirements and regulatory requirements. We saw it in the quality policy section, where we have to have a commitment to communicate our quality policy to the rest of the organization. And here in responsibility, authority, and communication, we're going to elaborate on that even further about how we talk about our quality system, and more specifically, how we talk about the effectiveness of our quality system within the organization. And we start with section 5.5.1. So top management shall ensure that responsibilities and authorities are defined, documented, and communicated within the organization. So you're kind of talking about organizational structure. You're talking about an organizational chart that defines the reporting structure, job descriptions that establish authority. And then it says, top management will document the interrelation of all personnel who manage, perform, and verify work affecting quality, and shall ensure the independence and authority necessary to perform these tasks. That sentence right there, if you've ever wondered why your site quality leader reports to me instead of the director of operations for your site, it is because of that sentence in ISO 5.5.1 that establishes the requirement that quality personnel have to have independence and authority necessary to perform their designated tasks. And that independence comes from the fact that they don't report to the site. They report to an individual outside of the site. So they can make the necessary compliance decisions without any fear of repercussions from site leadership, because they have to make an unpopular decision. That is a very common organizational structure in organizations of our size, medium to large medical device manufacturing companies. When you have a small company that is just one location, oftentimes there's a lot of different ways you can manage the organizational structure there. But once you get into a multi-site type of a organization, it's very common for there to be that kind of reporting structure, because it very clearly articulates that independence and authority. Okay. Site quality leader usually has a title like a quality manager, senior quality manager, director of quality, something like that. Somebody who is within management, and I'm going to highlight that because it is very specifically called out in the regulation. Where is it? A member of management, right? So the top management, meaning executive leadership team, maybe the DOO and the rest of the leadership team at the site level, is going to appoint a member of the management team who is the management representative for the site with respects to quality. I'm struggling to think of an example or an organization that I worked at where this was not the quality manager or some equivalent title. The senior site quality personnel is always the management representative. Now, there is a difference between top management and management representative. And on the FDA side of the regulations, they call it, there is top management, and then the FDA calls it management with executive responsibility, which it would be your DOO at your site. Management representative is, think about it this way. Top management and executive management represent the organization. The management representative here in 5.5.2 represents the quality management system. They represent your quality system to top management within your organization. And irrespective of other responsibilities, they have to ensure, here A, B, and C, ensure that processes needed for the QMS are documented so that you've got a fully structured and documented QMS going back to section 4, and that they report to top management on the effectiveness of the QMS and the need for improvement. That drives management review. So our management review procedures and processes are driven by this requirement here in 552B. And they also ensure the promotion of awareness of applicable regulatory requirements and the QMS requirements. So remember, top management has the responsibility to commit to the organization that we will meet customer and regulatory requirements. They also have a commitment to communicate that to the organization. They funnel that through the management representative, who is responsible for ensuring that that communication takes place. That doesn't mean that the quality manager is always the one that has to make that communication. They don't have to deliver the communication, but they are responsible for making sure that it happens and that the quality management system is communicated throughout the organization. Taking that communication one step further, top management will ensure appropriate communication processes are established so that communication takes place regarding the effectiveness of the quality system. It's not good enough to verbally commit that you will communicate all these things throughout your organization. You have to have an established process that says, here is how we communicate to the rest of the organization about quality objectives, about our quality policy, about our commitment to customer and regulatory requirements. Remember, we started off, I'll go back up to the top, with a shall. Where is it? Top management shall provide evidence of its commitment. And part of that evidence, whenever you see a shall, auditor's going to be looking for the evidence to prove that you're doing it. That established process of communication, that procedure that says, here's how we roll this out, is part of the evidence that they're going to be looking for that says you are meeting that management commitment. Any questions about any of that before we move on to management review?
Yes, Brian, I do have one question. This is Juan Jose from Costa Rica side speaking. I have a question specific to this point, internal communication. Honestly, we don't have like a separate procedure to define how the internal communication happen in our site and in our quality system. But what I can tell to an auditor, internal auditor or external auditor, is that we have a management review process defined, for which we get together mainly management positions and talk about quality objectives and quality policy. But that will only include management positions, right? For the rest of the people in the campus, not only engineers, but also operators, we don't have any, I'm going to say, any formal or quality system documented meeting. We do have like town halls, and we are able to share, for example, PowerPoints in which we talk about the quality policy or the quality objectives. But other than that, we don't have like a formal procedure or attendance records or something like that, you know? So at the end, I guess my question is, are we in a risk position for not having like a internal procedure specifically talking about internal communication and how those quality objectives mainly are reaching to them?
So let me ask you this one, Jose. So great question. Do you post on the walls of the facility the performance of your tier 1 metrics?
No, but what we have, I mean, our site director send periodically an email like once per month, and he speaks there about our tier 1 metrics, of course, with information that the quality department provide to him.
So here's how I would answer your question. Remember, the auditor is going to be looking for evidence that you are meeting this top management commitment to communicate to the organization. If you feel confident that you can provide enough evidence in terms of, you know, the presentations from the all employee meetings, the emails from Kevin, right, every month that talk about the metrics, and you can show with evidence that you were sending these communications out, you will probably be okay. Could you further solidify your position by having some structure that says these are the ways and frequencies with which we communicate about our quality system to the rest of the organization? That's an extra step you could go that would improve your compliance position. But once you put it on paper, you got to do it, right? So if you say that we're going to send a monthly email from Kevin to all the staff talking about metrics, you better make sure that you can show evidence of 12 emails every year, right? Otherwise, you're now non-conforming to your internal procedure.
Okay, thanks for that. Actually, I remember the last time FDA was here, which was in November 2018, and she actually asked, "Hey, show me what do you have regarding internal communication?" So we needed to go to those PowerPoint presentations. At the end, she was happy with it, right? But I always am wondering. I mean, is that will be enough, or do we have so I agree with your approach about. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. One of the ways that we also establish this internal communication is through management review. Management review is how the management representative communicates internally to the rest of the leadership team and whoever attends management review about the performance of the quality management system, its ongoing effectiveness, but also on how the site is performing in terms of meeting the customer and regulatory requirements. And the management review section of the regulation is one of the more explicit, by the book parts of the regulation that you're going to find in terms of what they want to see in management review. They give you a list that we're going to go through. But first, I want to talk a little bit about this general section around management review, because it says the organization you shall have a procedure for management review, and you shall review the quality management system at planned intervals, but it doesn't say how frequently you have to do it. And this is a topic that comes up a lot. Should you do management review annually? Should you do it twice a year? Should you do it quarterly? And there is no specific answer in the regulation that says you have to do it this frequently. But here's the guidance that I will give you on how often you should be doing your management review. The interval should be appropriate or be driven by why you are doing management review. So if you think about why you're doing management review is done, and it shall include assessing opportunity. Well, let me skip up a section here. At document planned intervals to ensure that ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. Okay, so if you take a step back from that and you think about, okay, but what does our quality management system have to be effective at doing? It's got to be suitable to do something. It's got to be adequate to do something. It's got to be effective at doing it. But what is it that our quality management system is supposed to do? We got to go all the way back to the scope of the regulation. And we get to the scope of the regulation, it's going to look very familiar, because you must have a quality management system to demonstrate your ability to provide medical devices and services that meet customer and applicable regulatory requirements. So all the way back to the beginning of the scope, we're seeing the same language. Can we meet customer and applicable regulatory requirements? So when you're thinking about how often you need to have management review, it should be driven by what frequency do you think that you need to be looking at your quality system in order to determine, are you still able to do these things? That should be a risk-based discussion internal to your organization. It should depend on the size of your organization, the volume of product that you ship. There is no explicit requirement, as we saw. It just says planned intervals. If after all of that, you're still not sure how frequently you should be having management review, reach out to myself and we can talk through it and establish a schedule that makes sense for your organization. But just remember, your quality management system fundamentally is intended to show that you can consistently meet customer and applicable regulatory requirements. If at some point you stop being able to do that, you want to be able to detect it as fast as possible. So more and more, I am finding that the FDA and ISO bodies are pushing back on sites that only do management review once a year, because that essentially means that once a year you have the opportunity to determine whether or not your quality system is effective at all and make changes accordingly. And once a year is not reacting as quickly as they want you to react to signals that your quality system is sending you. Questions about that while I scroll all the way back to section 5 after our detour there? Sorry, hopefully I'm not making everybody dizzy as you watch my screen fly past here. All right, management review. So we do management review to ensure the following. And in that review, we will include assessing opportunities for improvement and changes to the quality management system. If we find that our quality system is not suitable, it's not adequate, or it's not effective, this is when we decide that we're going to make changes to it so that we can become suitable, adequate, and effective. And if you've participated in management reviews, you've probably seen that there is frequently, near the end of the presentation, a slide that specifically asks the question, does your quality management system appear to be suitable, adequate, and effective? Frequently, if you don't have that slide, you will get a finding for your management review process for not explicitly stating whether or not you believe you continue to meet that requirement. You also need to look at whether you need to make improvements or changes to your quality policy, and you need to make improvements or changes to your quality objectives. These are all things that have to be covered and explicitly stated as an output of your management review. So the things that you talk about in management review are explicitly called out here. We've got customer feedback, complaint handling, reporting to regulatory authorities, audits, monitoring, measuring process, monitoring, measuring product, CAPAs. We've got follow-up action items from previous management reviews, change to the quality system, improvements, new or revised regulatory requirements. So these are kind of the directly linked to the outputs that I just talked about. Do you have to make changes or improvement to your system? And are you suitable and effective at meeting customer and regulatory requirements? So here's how we talk about, can we meet customer requirements? When we're talking about feedback, complaint handling, audits, monitoring processes and products, even CAPAs, that's talking about, are we meeting customer requirements? This section down here starts to talk about, are we meeting regulatory requirements? Does anybody have any questions specifically about management review inputs? I do want to clarify, reporting to regulatory authorities, just because it's something we don't do very frequently as a contract manufacturer. This refers to things like adverse events, recalls. There's annual reporting that you have to do for risk management and complaint handling purposes. So those are some of the reporting to regulatory authorities that you would discuss in your management review, if that was something that was within the scope of your organization. Okay, now we're talking about management review outputs. The management review outputs are essentially your presentation, or usually you have a presentation that the management representative gave to leadership. You'll have meeting minutes, and the meeting minutes are a quality record that should include any improvements needed to maintain the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of your QMS, any improvements that you said you needed to make to customer-related requirements and regulatory requirements. Here we're seeing it repeat again. Can we meet customer requirements? Can we meet regulatory requirements? And if we think we can't in either of those circumstances, what improvements or changes do we need to make in order to be able to do that within our quality management system? The last section here is around resource needs. Resource needs is a little bit of a sensitive topic in management review. The resources that we're talking about are not direct labor resources. This is not the point in your management review where you talk about whether or not you have enough operators to meet customer demand. This is, do you have enough resources to execute your quality management system in order to ensure that you can meet customer requirements and you can meet regulatory requirements? That also doesn't mean we're only talking about quality personnel. Resources could be infrastructure, it could be human resources like people, it could be financial resources like capital investment of money, anything that is needed so that your quality system can continue to ensure that you can meet customer requirements and regulatory requirements. Those are the resource needs that you're supposed to be discussing as part of management review. Now, if you have a direct labor shortage, and because of that direct labor shortage, you're seeing things like tremendous spikes in nonconformances, or you're seeing, because of the learning curve of new employees, that you're not meeting customer requirements, or you're not able to train quickly enough. So we've got people, we're not meeting regulatory requirements because we've got people doing things they're not trained to do. then in those circumstances, yes, those resource deficiencies are affecting your suitability and effectiveness of your quality management system, and they do become part of this conversation here if it is to that level or that extreme. Some things to point out: management review is one of the few things that the FDA is not allowed to look at. During an FDA inspection, they are not allowed to look at your management review presentation and all of the data that you review during management review. They can ask for evidence that you performed a management review, and you can do that by showing them a snippet of your management review meeting minutes. But I will also tell you that if management review is the only place, so remember, there is in other parts of the regulation, there are requirements for you to perform analysis of data to identify trends and take action against those trends to improve product conformity and reduce risk. If the only time in your organization that you do that full data analysis is during management review, then you likely are going to have to show management review to an FDA inspector. Otherwise, you're going to get a 483 for your inability to show evidence that you're doing that level of data analysis. So you can do it that way you will. If you're already doing data analysis in a lot of other areas and reviewing it and documenting it, and you can show evidence of that, then you don't need to worry about showing the FDA your management review. If you're not doing it, then you are going to end up showing them your management review. But the reason why the FDA was originally set up to not be able to review management review, the areas that they can't look at are management review, internal audits, and supplier audits. And the reason it was structured that way is because they wanted organizations to be able to have a protected area of their quality system where they could air all of their dirty laundry, have a very honest conversation about the faults within their quality system without running the risk that it would immediately be discovered by the FDA as part of their inspection. And then the FDA would know all of your dirty laundry and then just pick it apart during an inspection. Michelle, that's a really good point. Sometimes what organizations will do is if they're only doing data analysis in management review, they'll just pull those data analysis slides out and show it to the FDA, but not show them the full presentation. You can sometimes get away with that. Some FDA inspectors are very particular about if you're going to hand me a record, you have to hand me the full and complete record. You can't hand me partial records. And some of them are fine just seeing snippets of a PowerPoint presentation. So it kind of depends on your FDA inspector. But yes, so management review, internal audits, supplier audits outside the scope of FDA review so that you can use that as an opportunity to really be transparent about the shortcomings of your quality system. I think just as a quick review, we'll go back up here to the beginning, make sure we hit all the highlights. We talked about how top management has to commit to meeting customer and regulatory requirements, how they communicate that to the organization. We talked about how the Section 5 establishes the requirement for a quality policy. Later on, it says specifically what needs to be in that quality policy, and we talked about how ours satisfies those requirements. It talks about establishing quality objectives, and we talked about examples within our own organization of what those quality objectives are. We talked about how the top management must plan and structure your quality management system so that it puts you in a position to achieve those quality objectives. We talked about D, conducting management review, and E, ensuring availability of resources. We talked about that a little bit in management review, how that's part of the management review conversation, but you're going to see that E actually breaks out and becomes Section 6.0, which is all about resources. But again, those resources are not just human resources. Oftentimes it's infrastructure, it's equipment, in addition to the resources piece. That is this resource management section here. So our next understanding ISO training is going to be on Section 6.0 resource management. So I will stop presenting real quick. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, anything you'd like me to elaborate on, scenarios you'd like me to talk through, or ways that our organization handles any of those specific things?
So Brian, this is Michelle. I'm going to go back to Juan Jose, his comment about the metrics, the tier 1 metrics. So I don't know if they have like a break room with a running slide deck of information that is shared with individuals as well. That's also a good place to put a lot of the information. Then during customer audits, when your customers are walking through your facility, you're not airing your dirty laundry in front of all of your customers. And then it can be shut off if need to be shut off, right? So that's another good place to put that communication information.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's a good point. Juan Jose, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Can you please repeat the place you're suggesting? I'm sorry that I didn't completely understand.
Like in the cafeteria?
Yes. So like a cafeteria
Okay.
break room or wherever, if there's a common area where people tend to collect and you have a monitor that displays, if you display your communication for your health benefits or whatever the case may be, new employees or, things of that nature, that those slides can be added in there as well.
Yeah, frequently we will do that and primarily use it for HR announcements, right, to the staff, but you can also use it to include quality objectives as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Right, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment to share. I don't know if you can share again the ISO in the management review section. In our ISO audit in 2020, we had an auditor that he asked. That will be no, in the management review section, please. The exercise he did, yeah, 6.6.2. Okay, I'm just sharing this just to, I mean, if this eventually may happen to you
Yeah.
in your audits. Okay, I want you to prove that you are meeting with all the points there, A, B, C, D, E. And at the end, we had a finding because I don't remember what points we were not able to show that we were covering during the management review. I believe it's in the next page. But believe me that he went point by point, verifying that was being covered in the management review meetings. So at the end, that ended in a minor non-conformance in our report. Just to share that experience to all of you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is very common that they will almost treat that, well, they do treat it like a checklist and they look for all of the evidence for each of those things. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your attendance this afternoon. Look forward to the next one of these training sessions on Section 6 around resources. I did record the session, so if you came in late or if there are others in the organization that you think would benefit from this training or you want to use it as a reference, as soon as the recording is available in Teams, I will post a link in the channel so people have access to it. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.